I don't think you need to be a climate scientist to be a sustainability professional. You need that curiosity, you need to learn the basics, but then again, there's so much out there today in terms of free resources or paid resources for you to be able to learn that basics, but then really apply that in those practical ways. Earlier, I think we talked about sustainability being a long-term game. As a smaller business or larger business, to me, the questions are still the same. Climate change will impact society in many different ways. It could be natural disasters, but it also can be migration, it can be wealth distribution. There will be changes to society, and there are much more smarter people than me that model those things and predict them. There is so many resources out there already, and associations like MENA Fintech Association, I'm sure, has got a lot too. Access to knowledge sharing, to free resources, to convening the conversations, big and small, to learn from each other. And not all problems have to be solved individually. Sustainability can't be solved individually. It has to be a collaborative effort to together make an impactful change.
Good afternoon, Magdalena, and welcome everyone to this special episode of the MENA Fintech Association Sustainability Alliance that is recorded for International Women's Day. This podcast is bringing influential voices in finance and sustainability. My name is Amélie Arras. I'm also the chair of the MENA Fintech Association, and I'm your host today. Today I'll be joined with Magdalena Marzano, ESG and reputational risk at Standard Chartered Bank.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Magdalena. So as part of this International Women's Day series, this conversation aims to inspire professionals and organizations to embrace sustainability and navigating the challenges and opportunity within ESG regulation. Magdalena is responsible for the ESG regulations across Standard Chartered Bank, a global footprint in over 50 markets. She'll share her insights into global sustainability regulation, the skill gap in the industry, and how financial institutions, both the traditional and the crypto, can be enabler of sustainable change. Magdalena, welcome.
Hi.
Look, I'm very keen to know from you first. It's a pleasure to have you here. And could you start by introducing yourself to the audience and your role at Standard Chartered?
Sure. So my name is Magdalena Marzano, and I'm in the ESG and reputational risk team at Standard Chartered in risk. So we look after our ESG and climate risk management frameworks. And as part of that, I look after all of the ESG regulations globally for Standard Chartered, and advisory for various emerging risks, including digital assets and carbon markets.
That's quite impressive. How did you start your journey, Magdalena?
I did it by accident, actually. So I did a PhD in social psychology of financial markets, and that got me recruited to Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. As at that time, there was after the financial crisis, there was a lot of focus on culture and accountability. So it was closely aligned to what I was researching. So that's how it all started.
How did you? I mean, you said it's by accident. So how do you feel that your background, your academic background, might have contributed to your success in these roles before you landed your Standard Chartered?
I think a defining feature of that, I suppose, is the curiosity that you bring from a research degree of any kind. It doesn't really matter what topic it is, into your roles, and how you'll then kind of continue learning other topics, how you ask questions, how you investigate topics and problems. And I think that's really what I found ended up being a very transferable skill to banking.
Today, the episode is on International Women's Day. I'm very I'm very keen to know, like, what does that mean to you, that particular day?
I mean, it means a lot. So I think when you asked me to do this, actually, though this will notice, but I have never actually done a podcast before. This is my first time. But I wanted to do this because, when you start your career, at least at the time, there wasn't really all that many resources like this to show what the different options are and how to get into doing certain things. So I hope that it helps someone.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like, it's starting the journey anyway. Myself in financial services, I certainly found that it was difficult to have a role model. I think like now there is a lot more now being done. Um, you have all of the women in finance, women in tech, women in crypto association, which are actually there to bring the role model in front of us. But it's not something that personally, when I started my career, was there. I'm very happy that you're here, that you decided to participate in, although you might not have done a podcast before, because to me, I think with this podcast, what I want to show to the rest of the audience is that we've got how people are starting their journey in sustainability, and for me to see you as a woman on the podcast here today, reputational ESG and reputational risk at Standard Chartered Bank, you are a role model. And I'd love to hear more about your journey into sustainability. How did it started? So what initially drew you to sustainability and ESG?
So I think it's we talked about the curiosity, right? Roll back to about 2018 or so, I was covering enterprise risks in Standard Chartered, and that including a lot of strategic and emerging risks for Asia at the time. And one of these emerging risks at the time was climate risk. There wasn't really a lot of understanding yet in the banking industry how that interacts with what we do as our bread and butter, the credit markets. So looking into this topic, understanding what does that really mean for banking, how do we approach this in practical way that is actually meaningful in the context of our sort of daily activities as a financial institution.
And so many professionals are transitioning into sustainability role. I've been working with a company that has had a sustainability director with a background of carbon accounting, and I wonder, is there a specific previous career journey that you need before you get into sustainability, or like where do you start? Where would people start?
My view is I don't think you need to be a climate scientist to be a sustainability professional. You need that curiosity, you need to learn the basics, but then again, there's so much out there today in terms of free resources, pay resources for you to be able to learn that basics, but then really apply that in those practical ways. So strategic mindset, being able to connect that technical knowledge into the sort of application side of it in financial services is actually much more important. So really, it doesn't really that much matter the previous background. It's more about how you think and are you able to sort of connect these problems together and work out how do you use that to the organization's advantage, to the advantage of environmental society in this case as well.
Is there a particular area of either the E, the S, or the G that you feel more drawn into, or that you feel that organization are naturally putting more resources into?
I think there is, as a bank, we need to look at ESG quite holistically because we do operate in a variety of markets. We support clients in a variety of industries. These will bring different issues, concerns, risks, but also opportunities for us, for our clients. So we have to look holistically, and we do that both in terms of how do we support our clients in terms of their sustainability journeys, their transition, as well as looking through the risks that relate to our bank as well in the process.
And so now we see that there is a lot of regulation now coming in, especially in the environmental side. Are you able to tell me a little bit more about how do you see these regulation? How have you seen these regulation evolving in the past few years, and how you might be navigating either the complexity? I guess there is regulation in the UK, but then there is also regulation in the MENA region, and there would be, in all of the variety of markets that you're serving, the regulation would be different.
Yes, the landscape has gotten really quite complex in the past couple of years in particular. We've seen a lot of different markets coming up with regulations, be it risk management related, taxonomies, disclosure requirements, all sorts. So for a bank like ours, it is extremely important that there is as much consistency as possible between those, and to enable better interoperability between different markets, and also for our clients who have low footprint just as we do. So this is something that we always advocate with our key regulators, and lack of that consistency from a sort of practical perspective brings operational overheads and other complications. Perhaps methodologies don't quite align. So we, in the spirit of better data quality, greater comparability of disclosures, and all the things that actually then bring benefits from doing all of that, we advocate for that alignment.
Yeah. Do you see that the biggest challenge is transparency or alignments and standardization in the disclosures are required?
Depends from whose perspective. So I think obviously with my day job hat on, I care about the alignment, the standardization, interoperability. This is very important to be able to satisfy various requirements across different markets we operate in, while at the same time producing something that is useful in terms of, for example, we talked about disclosures, something that's useful to our investors, but useful to other stakeholders that use them, that read them, that take decisions on their based on their content. So that's very important to me personally in the job, but also I think from the perspective of the users of this information, being able to have information that is useful to the decision making, be it investment, be it something else, collaboration, calculations of their own emissions, all of those things, is very important. So proportional disclosures, comparable methodologies, these are all important to actually get to the proper use cases for all of this effort, great spend.
That's when you said about how the end users are going to use the information. I've got a little question for you on this because, and I'll take the example of like what's happening currently in Europe So the European Union, European Commission, ESMA regulators do care about sustainability, and they want to drive the sustainability agenda forward. They want companies to adopt more sustainable practice. Now, what happened in Europe specifically, and I'll go quite niche because it is in the digital assets sector, the new piece of regulation called MiCA, which stands for Market in Crypto Assets Regulation, has got a section specifically to sustainability, and it is asking mandatory disclosures on environmental adverse impact for all of the crypto companies to disclose to the end users so that they can make better decision. I feel this is a very interesting way of going about it, because when in discussion I had challenges where some people have said, well, does this actually help the end user to make any decision, or does it not? With all of this data that we are collecting on the adverse environmental impact of different type of businesses, doesn't have to be crypto necessarily, but do you feel that the users are actually empowered to be able to read these disclosures in a way that help them to make better decision?
Yes, but I think we need to consider who are the end users and what information, what decision making that we're talking about quite broadly. So, you mentioned MiCA. I think this is a great example because it is a new area. And really the very basic initial disclosure, what it does, it sparks a conversation about how do we even think about attribution of carbon emissions from blockchain-based solutions? Well, actually, it also sparks questions about, okay, what about thinking a little bit wider beyond blockchain into other technologies that are cryptography dependent, AI more widely, right? What does that mean for us in terms of that wider usage? Does that information, what do we do with this information? Does it challenge some of the thinking around the design around some of those things, or the logistical setup? What is the business opportunity here? What is the risk to the business? So I think it's less about, okay, the number is such and such, and therefore my decision is the following. It's more about considering those elements more widely in the context of what it might mean to your business.
And that's a really good point. I really like that, because ultimately business would need to understand better, like, what's the risk associated with doing business. I want to go back to something that you said at the beginning about like you and at the bank. Earlier you mentioned about part of your role was part of like your drive for joining sustainability was an unsatisfied curiosity for what does climate change and its uneven trajectory mean for the banks and the bread and butter of what you do in credit and in markets. Could you give me some example of has your unsatisfied curiosity been fulfilled here, or like what do you feel there is that you like? What are these? What do they mean? Tell me a little bit more about.
I guess that the curiosity has evolved. Let's just say. So but I think the basics of it are simple. So climate change can bring risk to the bank. It can affect the credit standing of the companies we finance. Just fundamental things like that. But it can also, the financing that we provide can contribute to either positive or negative impact on environmental society. So it's about being thoughtful and mindful of what that impact is when we do our business, and being also aware what the impact back to the bank might be under whatever scenario. So it really comes down to that as the very basic dynamic, and what we're trying to control for in risk management division like ours. Now, that is the basics, but obviously, that the understanding sort of evolves. So I think now that we all collectively know more about the subject and we're moving beyond those basics into the bigger questions. Sustainability is a long game. What does that mean to our businesses? What does that mean to our strategy? What do we stand for? And how are we going to get there? How will we be able to demonstrate that we're getting there? But it's about those bigger questions now, as well as getting down, really comfortable with the basics as well.
So I'm amazed. I look forward to reading the report, by the way, and I'm amazed because there is, from a bank's perspective, there is so much that you as a division you're able to think about. It might not be the case for smaller organizations, which is a point actually I want to go back a bit later. But first I wanted to ask you, how do you feel that regulation is either enabling you or perhaps giving you an additional burden that might not contribute to going toward the right goal?
So earlier, I think we talked about sustainability being a long-term game. As a smaller business or larger business, to me, the questions are still the same. Climate change will impact society in many different ways. It could be natural disasters, but it also can be migration. It can be wealth distribution. There will be changes to society, and there are much more smarter people than me that model those things and predict them. But the questions then is, okay, what does that mean to your business strategically? How do you position yourself in terms of opportunities, but also risks to your business? What will your role be in that adaptation? And all while trying to do least harm possible from your end.
And how do you find regulation is, what do you feel the role of regulation is in here? Is it an enabler to all of this?
It is, in the sense that it is forcing us to have the tough conversations. So there's so much variability. Obviously, thinking from the perspective of the regulators, they've got the financial stability mandates, they've got consumer protection mandates. So this is where their perspective is coming from. But it just treating ESG as a compliance exercise would be a massively missed opportunity, really, because like I said, it is about the adaptation and long-term sustainability of the businesses, while also keeping an eye on what is important to us in terms of the impact on society and on environment.
Yeah. How would you say that organization can stay ahead of regulatory changes to ensure compliance, but also while maximizing the sustainability impact?
I think staying ahead of the discussions is very important. Engaging with the associations like MENA and other fintech associations out there, and engaging in early policy advocacy. I think sustainability, climate risk, these are all perfect sort of examples of that happening, because there has been in the past few years, as the regulation developed, there has been a lot of conversations between the regulators and the industry in terms of what that means, what should it look like in the future. So this is a great opportunity for learning and for really collectively asking ourselves those questions. And then depending on what our mandates are, from regulators' perspective, the financial stability, from, our different organizations' perspective, obviously thinking both commercially as well as on the impact side of things as well, that can then mean a lot of different things. So using that as an opportunity to have the discussion.
And then moving on now from the regulatory parts, and you did mention that to keep in for professional and organization to keep abreast of what's going on the regulatory side, the role of policy advocacy and membership organization. I'd love to talk a bit more about the role of financial institution as an enabler of sustainability, which I think is to me anyway. When I look at Standard Chartered Bank and leading on sustainability this way, and again, I look forward to reading the reports as well of what you've been doing over the past year. I see them as cascading down, really, and also educating on the smaller organization what they must be doing, because you have all of the resources as larger institution. But very keen to hear, what's your stance on it? Do you see them as an enabler?
I think banks like us, we're absolutely the enablers in terms of connecting the financing needs to the sources of funding. And Standard Chartered itself has got a 300 billion pledge in sustainable finance by 2030, and we're working with clients to help them achieve their climate goals as well. So, and in the process, that enhances our resilience to climate change too. So it's there's a lot that banks can do in this regard. But at the same time, I think it's not just banks. You don't have to be a big organization to contribute, right? Whether you're a crypto organization or a different type of fintech, there's so much that can be done. I think we talk about tokenized green bonds. We've got tokenized green energy trading. There is so much in terms of innovation that still is out there to be done, that there's a role for everyone. We've got a lot out there. There's lots of sort of thought leadership pieces that we put out there that others put out there. So there is lots available for inspiration. And partnerships are key, both public, private, through associations, that really it drives the change.
So we talked about small organizations. What we have found out through the MENA Fintech Association Sustainability Alliance is that some organization might not have the right people with the right knowledge to be able to drive sustainability. I myself, from a startup, as I said, and we're lucky because we had a sustainability director from the get-go, from the inception. But that's not the case for each of the small organization, or even for the fintech. And even, I'd say in the crypto space, we're far, far away from having any professional. How do you feel about this skill gap or knowledge gap? How do we is that a need for ESG education to be able to push to have more people with the right skill and the right knowledge within an organization to push forward a sustainability agenda?
Yes, I think we owe it to ourselves to be aware of the subject. But again, I think I mentioned earlier that you don't have to be a climate scientist to do this. Really, the basics is all you need. And then it's all about putting that into practice and what's meaningful for your business. So that counts most. But there is so many resources out there already. And associations like MENA Fintech Association, I'm sure, has got a lot too. Access to knowledge sharing, to free resources, to convening the conversations, big and small, to learn from each other. And not all problems have to be solved individually. Sustainability can't be solved individually. It has to be a collaborative effort to together make an impactful change. So, we talked about some of the thought leadership pieces like we put out there, or like other organizations do. But there's also, organizations like fintech organizations can also facilitate discussions between smaller organizations and regulators or other partnerships. So there's a lot that can be done with what's available out there today. So it doesn't have to start huge. It can start small, and there's a lot there to be leveraged from.
I love that. And I think this is a perfect way to finish this podcast with your thoughts on collaboration. I love what you just said. Sustainability cannot be solved by just a lone voice. It has to be a collaborative process. So it's all about collaboration to drive ESG progress. And this is actually like exactly what we strive for in MENA Fintech Association. And it means so much to have had you today coming and joining to actually inspire other people to start maybe or to continue their journey in sustainability and drive progress within their own organization. And so where would they be able to find you if they wanted to connect? Where would they be able, what would be your best practical tips on where do they find the best sustainability education material?
Good question.
Books that you might be very interested in that you're like, if you want to go in there, you have to read this book.
So I don't think I got one resource that I would recommend. Honestly, for me, it was just time spent to read various sources and, deepen the knowledge on kind of particular terminology, particular concepts. And there's just so much out there with many different perspectives. So just reading. I know it's not necessarily kind of a revolutionary answer, but really that all that there needs to be. If you don't need fancy courses, it's about staying curious, about wanting to learn more, about wanting to about being conscious. What is the impact that you want to make as an organization, and seeing how you can do that and how you can show that you've done that.
Thank you, Magdalena. I think I love this. Curiosity, read. Going back to the beginning of the podcast, and satisfy curiosity. There we go. My curiosity has been satisfied for today. Up until the next time of how I would be spending hours asking you loads of questions about this, because I find that space fascinating, and I find people's journey into sustainability incredibly interesting and needed. I want to know how else people are going into the space, and I want to inspire the rest of the people to go and learn more. So
I'm always happy to have a conversation.
Certainly we'll be inviting you back on this. So thank you for listening to this episode. This was brought to you by the MENA Fintech Association and Sustainability Alliance. Today we were with Magdalena Marzano, who is ESG and reputational risk at Standard Chartered Bank. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here for celebrating International Women's Day and being a female voice representing sustainability.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Magdalena.
Thank you, Amélie.